So today we are starting a new worship series, and that series is called Habitus, as Sarah mentioned during the song. If you ask the staff about Habitus, some of them will their eyes will probably start twitching a little bit because we've been talking about it for such a long time, and it's been a conversation starter in several meetings that we've had as we're trying to understand how the things that we're doing in worship are shaping your lives as you're coming in worship. And by the way, if you're a child and you want to go to Sunday school, you can leave now. Your teachers are in the back waiting for you. So in this series, I want to accomplish a few things, and I'm really presenting this to you all, not necessarily as a sermon per se, where I'm exhorting you to do something, but I want to present an idea, and I want to explore something with you all together. My goal or my hope is that we would all gain an understanding about how it is that some Christian movements, the early church, the Wesleyan movement, the Franciscan movement, and many others, were able to effectively transform the lives of those people that they were ministering to or ministering with. And as a part of this series, I'm going to suggest why it is that the church today, so if we're looking at why some church movements and some church groups were able to bring about Christ-like transformation in the lives of those they are serving, that suggests that the church of today is not doing that, right? So that's where I'm starting. Some churches were able to make Christ-like transformation. The church today is not doing that. And a question I'm interested in exploring with you all is why. Why were some churches able to while some churches aren't? My hope is that we will all see that if we would be transformed as some church movements were transformed, we'll need to adopt the same or similar strategies that those church movements adopted for themselves. So what I'm expecting from you all is since I'm presenting this as more of a thesis, and since it's a thesis, I may be wrong, right? I don't think I'm wrong. Otherwise, I wouldn't stand up here and say what I'm about to say, but I may be wrong. So how you guys can help me is by listening openly, thinking critically, asking good questions throughout the week, and as appropriate, asking good questions even while I'm teaching. So habitus. What is a habitus? We're going to start by looking at two definitions before we kind of launch into this message. What is a habitus? A habitus is an old Latin word that refers to a condition or a state or a manner of being, right? But it's most popularly describing how a person's experiences or their social environments shape their behaviors and their habits. That's what a habitus is. A simpler way of thinking of it is a habitus is the habits, the environment that we're in is forming within us through social osmosis. So if you think about the word inhabit us, like what is our environment inhabiting within us? That's what a habit is. It's how our environment is shaping us and molding us and pushing us to think and act and behave in certain ways. Every environment you enter has a habitus, whether it's church or school, whether it's the grocery store or the classroom. We're all being acted upon by this invisible force that's around us. And it's not in malicious ways, it's just the nature of what environments do. As we enter into an environment, we begin thinking that we need to value certain things. Each environment has their norms and their principles and the things that they highly esteem. So whenever you enter into an environment, you're immediately being acted upon by whatever that habitus is. So hold that idea in your mind. And indeed, while you're sitting here, you might want to consider, what is the habitus of this space that we're in right now? What are the values and norms of this worship sanctuary that we're in right now? Another word that I want you guys to consider is the word liturgy. Now, liturgy refers to the identity-shaping practices that are related to a habitus. So, although liturgy is kind of a religious word, most environments have a liturgy. If an environment has a habitus, it's more than likely that it's going to have a liturgy. For example, I ask you to think about the habitus of this space that we're in right now. The church has many habitus, right? one of the church's habitus, or one of the features that we value. Now, we may say that our main habitus is God or worship or discipleship or something like that, but one of the most powerful habitus within the church is listening and quiet, right? We value that. And you can tell that we value that by the way we practice that. So look at what you guys are doing right now. The way that you guys are sitting, the way our room is set up, it's demonstrating to you all what our habitus is, and you're going through a liturgical practice of strengthening in that habitus. You're sitting there, you're all looking at me. As I say that, it makes me feel uncomfortable, but you're all looking at me, you're quiet. I'm wearing a microphone because my voice is supposed to be the voice that you're paying attention to. If you were to say something, you would have to shout. But even if I just whisper, you can hear me. It's reinforcing that's the liturgical practice that you're engaging in that's closely related to our habitus of quiet and listening. So everything that we do in worship is related to our habitus. That's the liturgy. Other forms of liturgy are the calls to worship. The song that the band just sang, we do that every single week. That's a liturgical practice that's meant to strengthen our habitus. So see, when I said that the church had a habitus, I'm sure many of us immediately began thinking of the religious things we do together. But the church's habitus is not directly perceived by what we say, but is perceived by what they value and what we invite people to do. Then we create liturgy so that we can practice becoming the things that we value or the things that we normalize. So if you want to discover what the habitus is, what you'll need to do is try to discern the unspoken rules or the unspoken values of a space, the invisible pressures that are being placed upon you as you enter into an environment. Then pay attention to how those invisible forces are inviting you to practice living these things out. When you go to the Bengals game, there's a habitus there, and there's a liturgy to encourage you to become a certain kind of person. When you go to the mall, there's a habitus, and there's a liturgy. They're trying to move you to a certain kind of end. When your kids go to school, there's a habitus, and there's a liturgy, because they want the students to become certain kinds of students. Every environment has a habitus. Every environment invites you to practice that habitus through a liturgical ritual that will strengthen these values and norms within you. I've lost half of you already, okay? The remaining half is wondering, so what, you know? You know, someone's thinking Meshach learned a new word and now he's trying to show off by forcing it on everybody, you know? Trying to show us how smart he is, but he's really an idiot standing up there without any understanding. So what? What does this have to do with us on a Sunday morning? These words, habitus, liturgy. Well, here's the answer to that question. The reason it's important to be aware of the habitus and the subsequent liturgies of the world in which we live is because they're constantly shaping us into certain kinds of people. They're constantly tugging at our hearts and wooing us to desire certain things, right? And if we look at the world, we see that the world has actually grasped this at an expert level. The world understands this way and this concept way better than the church does. So for example, I mentioned shopping, online or in person. When you are shopping, what are the values of the mall or the value of Amazon? Why do we always return to those things? Why is it something that we do when we're bored or when we want to have a good time? The answer to that question is because they've cultivated a habitus that includes words like belonging and creativity, beautiful, cutting edge, confident. And those are things that we all value. Now, they're not stupid. They're not going to say, come to the mall to feel confident or buy this shirt to feel beautiful. They're not dumb. They don't present it that way. It's an invisible pressure that's acting upon us. And since they have that habitus, then you look at the liturgical practices that they employ to strengthen those values within you. So what's the liturgy of the mall? Let's do that as an exercise together real quick. What is the liturgy of the mall? How does the mall paint a picture of the good life? Let's shout out something. And don't feel guilty. I know there's some of you who are going to the mall after we get out of church. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. There's nothing wrong with shopping. I'm just trying to get you to see how the mall is acting upon you, okay? They display the merchandise. Specifically, how do they display the merchandise? Someone said, attractively. How many guys have been to like Dick's Sporting Goods and you see the Under Armour mannequin? Any? Yeah, right? This dude, describe the Under Armour mannequin. He's ripped. 6'2", 240, you know what I mean? African American, you know? You know, kind of built like a linebacker, you know? Why do they have the mannequins like that? What are they suggesting?
You could be like this. You could be like that.
Not only can you be like this, but this is what it's good to be like. It's good to be like this, right? The mall, they paint a picture of the good life, of happiness, of joy, and they don't do it cognitively, but they do it viscerally. They grab you through your emotions, through your eyes, through your experiences. They make you feel a certain way. Many of us have had the experience of looking at something at the mall and seeing it on the mannequin, and we buy it, and we feel happy. We go home, we're about to go out, we put it on. How come it doesn't fit on me like it fit on the Under Armour mannequin, right? But it's a brilliant process. When you go to a Bengals game, okay. You see the habitus at work. Actually, no. That's a good example. Why did they create that as a chant for us? Belonging. We're doing it together. We belong to the Bengals. We are a family. We cheer when they score. When you go to the Bengals stadium, you'll see pictures on the wall. Now, the Bengals haven't won a Super Bowl in forever. But the pictures on the wall would suggest that this is the best team of all time. If Peyton Manning's in a picture, he's in that picture getting sacked, right? He's not in that picture as the victor. He's in the picture as the one being conquered, right? That's a habitus. They're trying to employ something. Togetherness, belonging, we're family. We support one another. And by the way, you can support and you can be a part of this by doing what? Consume. Buy a ticket, come to the game, season tickets, all this stuff. Share it together. It's brilliant. It's precognitive. They're not like giving you a manuscript that says, hey, whenever we score, we're going to lead you through this chant, Houday. And the reason we're doing that is because we want to cultivate a sense of belonging within you. So that as you do that with 1,000 of your closest friends, your heart will feel like you're finally at home. No, they just have somebody lead you. Houday, right? It's brilliant. It's very brilliant. And it's brilliant because it aims right at your feeler. It hits you right in the feeler. It doesn't hit you in your thinker. It hits you in your feeler. It doesn't aim at your head, but it aims at your heart. Because which one of us don't want to feel a sense of belonging and purpose and confidence and joy? When somebody leaves the game, they say, we won the game, right? You didn't even break a sweat, you know? What's happened? The habitus has worked upon us. See, this is something that the ancient world understood, but the modern church, not the modern world, but the modern church has forgotten this. Humans are not primarily rational beings. Now, the age of enlightenment has tricked us into thinking that we are rational beings, but we're not. We are rational beings, but we're not primarily rational beings. Humans are primarily desiring beings. We don't think our way through the world, but we feel our way through the world. We intuit our way through the world. I think I read a study that said only in a day, in a 24-hour period, only 5% of our actions and behaviors are cognitive. The rest are precognitive. We just happen. No one walks down the street thinking, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. How many of you have had the experience of leaving your home to get somewhere, but because your mind is somewhere else, when you arrive at the destination, you're kind of shocked, like, how in the world did I get here so fast? Was I speeding? Did I kind of do a superhero thing and just transform and end up in this location? What happened? Driving is something, so, my daughter Charlie's about to start driving this year. When she starts driving, she's going to be thinking a whole lot. The sign of a good driver is someone that doesn't have to think. They just do it. The knowledge of driving has entered their body, right? That's the way we are in the world. We feel our way through the world. We have knowledge in our fingertips, in our toes, in our eyeballs, in our nose, and we react to certain things. And so understanding that humans aren't rational beings primarily, but that we're feelers, if you look at the story of Israel, you'll see that God is trying to warn Israel of this fact. So many of you are familiar with the story of Israel's conquest when they're entering the promised land. And God would always tell them, when you go into this land, there's going to be people living there. And the language seems harsh to us because God would say, I want you to drive them out completely. I want you to remove all their idolatrous statues, get rid of their practices. I want you to remove them completely. Why is God doing that? Because God knows that if they don't remove them completely and the Israelites begin engaging in their practices, those practices will slowly tug the hearts of the Israelites away from the true and living God towards something else. So he emphasizes, don't worship what they worship. Don't do what they do. Eliminate them completely. God understood that the things that you do something to you. You think you may just be bowing down to worship this thing, but that thing is tugging on your heart and it's affecting you. It's having an impact on you. It would start as a simple, seemingly harmless ritual, but before you know it, your heart is completely abandoned from God. And this happened in Israel's story over and over and over again. If you look at each time the Israelites fell into this period of being separated from God, it started with a practice. It started with a ritual. It started with a liturgy. The things you do something to you. This is why the proverb says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life. What is the heart in the Bible? In the Bible, the heart's not this thing that's pumping blood through our bodies. But in the ancient times, they understood the heart as being the center of a human being. So the heart is right here. Another translation for heart is guts. Keep your guts with all vigilance. Because from right here, your life flows. The springs of life, it's flowing from the core of your being. So God is saying, I want you to guard your heart. I want you to be careful at the thing that you're giving your heart to, because that's where your life is going to flow from. So if you're giving your heart to these practices that are shaping you to think that by consuming I can get joy, then without even knowing it, you'll find yourself desiring joy, and the only thing you'll know to do is to consume, to buy, to do something like that. Keep your heart, God says. Keep your guts. Watch the place where your life is flowing from. Now let me bring this up, the thesis of this series in the form of a question. Why is it that the modern church fails spectacularly at forming people into the likeness of Christ? Or first of all, would you agree that the modern church struggles tremendously with forming people in the likeness of Christ? Is that what Christianity is known for today? Is creating people that are like Jesus in spirit and in character? A few months ago, I saw there's a Twitter thread, and the thread was, it was like, hey man, we're always so divisive. Why don't we take some time and highlight some of the beautiful things that are located within each Christian denomination? And so, for Methodists, they had something like potlucks. For Catholics, they had like the tradition. For Lutherans, they had like the commitment to to studying the Bible. And I looked through the whole list in vain to see anything that said something like, the Presbyterians will really make you like Jesus. The Methodists will fill you with the fruit of the Spirit. The Catholics will make you into a saint. We're known for singing. We're known for fellowshipping. We're known for eating. We're not known for making people like Jesus, which is what Christian means, like Christ. Why is it that the modern church fails spectacularly at forming people into the likeness of Christ? And why is it that those who profess Christ as Savior and Lord have a behavior pattern that's similar to those who don't? And the data is there for everybody to see. Christian behavior, by and large, resembles exactly the behavior of our non-Christian sisters and brothers, friends and neighbors. Why is it? Well, an answer that I'd suggest to you is that for the last 200 years, the church has been educating the head, not the body. We've been treating the people that come to us as rational animals, not as desiring animals. A result of this is that Christians know so much about God, the Bible, theology, etc. But since we're not thinking things, the information that gets stuck in our head never filters down into our bodies. It never gets into our hearts, the place from where our life emerges. Here's a good example. How has the church sought to educate its people on sex and marriage over the last 200 years? You tell me. How's the church been addressing that issue? We talk about it, right? Which is the same as doing nothing. We talk about it. Or a minister will write a treatise, or somebody will write a book that talks about it. And usually it's what you shouldn't do, right? Now, how has the world sought to educate its people on sex and marriage? The arts, literature, entertainment, music, all these ways that come right to the heart. Sometimes we find ourselves singing these songs unconsciously. You know, it wasn't until my kids were born that I started paying attention to some of the lyrics and the songs that I'm playing while they're in the car, you know? But then I have like a toddler in the back seat. I'm like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't be singing that song, because if she starts singing that song, I'm going to think there's a problem, right? But the world is masterful because they don't present a lecture. They present an experience. They grab your heart. They pull your heart. They pull your heart. And it works. It's my belief that until the church begins to educate people, and by educate, we need to rethink what we mean by educate. Because when we think of educate, we think of passing information from one thimble to the other thimble. But education is truly formation. Education is not getting people to know about, it's forming people into the kinds of people that can become something. True education is not just passing on information, but it's passing on an experience that leads to transformation. So one of my favorite Mark Twain quotes, "The man that grabs a cat by the tail learns something you can learn in no other way." That knowledge is sown into your body. As the cat grabs you and you feel the strength of the cat and the anger of the cat, that's better than writing a paper on what happens if a cat grabs you by the tail, because now the knowledge is sown within you. That's true education, it's true formation. James K.A. Smith, he writes, "While Victoria's secret is fanning a flame in our heart, the church is trucking water to our minds. While secular liturgies are enticing us with affective images of a good life, the church is trying to convince us otherwise by depositing ideas." I don't care how many times you tell somebody smoking is bad for you. If the marketers grab their heart, that knowledge will be fruitless. We need to do better as a church. This is my thesis. This is just from what I'm looking at. We need to do better. Even, and I want to even speak openly about, look how we're gathering today. For the last 200 years, a minister has stood behind a pulpit and talked to people as the primary engagement of spiritual formation. And every minister I know is keenly aware of the fact that the 10 minutes I spend preaching, okay. It doesn't stand a chance. It doesn't stand a chance, right? Why? Like Dallas Willard said, 1 drop of water every 5 minutes will never equal a shower. It won't. It's ineffective. So if we really aim at forming people into the likeness of Christ, we need a different strategy. As the world smartly and wisely uses the resources to express itself and to woo people and draw people in, the church needs to do the same thing. When we talk about sex and marriage, we don't need to only do it as a lecture, but we need to present the beauty of sex and the beauty of marriage in ways that are life-giving, not as a treatise. This is why, I'm so happy that The Chosen, and some of you have probably watched The Chosen, but The Chosen does a masterful job of presenting Jesus in his beauty and his goodness. They do such a great job that when it's released in theaters, they're making more money than the secular movies that are released at the same time. The church needs to look at the day we're in and not simply say, let's carry on the traditions of the past and drag them into the future and have people engage in things that do not form them anymore. But the church needs to rethink our strategies if we really intend to help people become like Christ. It always wasn't this way. The church used to be a formative machine. The church used to be known as this group of people that if you go there, you're going to leave different. They're going to make a saint out of you. This is why the Apostle Paul admonished the church in Rome, saying, I appeal to you, therefore, sisters and brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your what? What does he say to present? Your bodies. Not your brains. Present your bodies as a living sacrifice. He goes on to say, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. See, Paul realized that the mind is renewed and the mind is transformed through what the body does. I don't become a humble person by only studying about humility, but as I engage my body in practices of humility, my mind is transformed. A sermon series on a life free from anger will never make me into the kind of person that's actually free from anger until with my body I begin engaging in the grace-filled practices that will enable me to set aside anger. Remember at a previous church, I was a part of a men's group. We read a book. It was so long. It was about 3 months long of studies, and it was about being free from fear. And at the end of the class, the question was, what book do you want to read next? And I said to them, how many of us feel like we're free from fear? And no one raised their hand. I'm like, then what's the point in going to another book? Why did we read the book in the first place? To learn about fearlessness or to become free from fear? We approached it as thinking things. If I get the information, I'll become. But we got the information and we didn't become. Paul says, present your bodies and your mind will be transformed. So here's why the early church was successful. They created strategies that would counter the formation one experienced in the world and then form them according to a Christian habitus. These strategies included practices that were embodied. They weren't just the mystical things that have been dragged through the generations, but they were embodied, visceral practices that were powerful at forming core memories that would make a lasting impression. For example, confession. For example, real reconciliation. For example, the kiss of peace. I'll share a little bit about the kiss of peace, then I'll be done. If you were a wealthy person in the early church, you lived a life where you never associated with people who were beneath you. So for a wealthy person to give a kiss to a pauper was unheard of. But if you, as someone that wanted to join the church, came to the church and they recognized that you had a habitus of superiority, during the kiss of peace, the bishop would say to you, go and kiss so-and-so over there and welcome them in the name of Christ. And by regularly doing that, superiority would drain from this person and humility would be established. They had strategies for making people like Christ. Well, my time has ended probably 10 minutes ago. As homework, I'd like you all to pay attention to the different habituses and liturgies that you engage in regularly. Don't criticize them, just become aware of them. And then next week, we'll take a look at how the early church sought to uproot superiority and implant humility, and how we can do so today, because it's something that is definitely needed today. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for being with us, for being our helper, for being our strengthener. And I pray, Lord, that you would go with us as we are thinking about the ways we're being formed. Open our eyes to see, our ears to hear, and our hearts to understand. In Jesus' name, amen.